All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Think Sacred podcast. If you're new joining us, this is a kind of an open discussion type podcast where we don't really come prepared, and we're kind of just talking based on certain topics that we kind of like come up with either the day of or the day before. And then usually I take a little bit more of a philosophical, worldly view, and Phil usually takes up a more theological type view. And today, hopefully, we'll be talking about art, how art maybe I would believe art comes from God, and what's its purpose, and then looking at art, from a biblical perspective. And so we'll get into some of that stuff. Before we get into that, though, we do have one comment that I wanted to say. It was a very nice comment. Rare for us. No, that's not. No.
And on here, we try to address some of the comments too that come across at the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. If you guys are listening and you guys have something to add, or you want to disagree with us, or you want to agree with us, or give your opinion, leave a comment, and we respond. We respond to almost every comment. Probably about 95% of the comments at the moment. Maybe eventually one day it will be too much for us to do that. But anyways, this person said, this is on our short where I was talking about when you are talking and discussing ideas with another person, the way to outdo them is to have a better idea than their idea. So you put forth your idea and you make it as strong as possible, and eventually the strongest idea wins out. So anyways, the comment was, this is what sophists taught back in the 5th century with Roman Greek rhetoric, during the times of Aristotle, Socrates, and Corax. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, like you said, like I said, if you were listening to right there, is, I usually take up a philosophical viewpoint on, what we're talking about. I took a lot of philosophy. Oh, God, I can't speak today. I took up a lot of philosophy classes in college. It was one of my favorite subjects, but my second favorite subject, or actually probably the majority of my classes, were actually art classes.
Okay.
Now, you yourself, though, you have an art degree, don't you?
Yeah. Can I comment on the comment real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, no problem. That it is a really good comment. One thing I just want to, and we've said it before, but it's worth repeating. It just has to do with how we are trying to go about, this discussion back and forth. We mentioned that. I mean, we want to have a good argument. All of us do, right?
Yeah.
That's important. And it's important for us to, it's important for anyone to know their subject. We, though, go into this discussion blindly because as we talked about, we try to make it more real, because just the way that we normally talk. So we try to simulate, like sitting at this desk, obviously in a little more formal setting, but we try to simulate the discussions that we have, that you and I have in the car, in the house, is walking around and stuff like that. So that's what we try to do. Now, regarding this discussion, you and I talked about, we want to be able to have a good argument. We're not trying to. The ultimate goal is not so much to win the argument, although it's important to have a better argument. But it's more important to have a good discussion, form a good collaboration. And for me, on the Christian side, I want them to say, "Hey, I understand. Hey, the Christian religion makes sense because of what we're saying here, right?" So they can go, that person out there in the world can go research what we're talking about and make sense of what we're trying to, talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
see, if you're in an actual debate format and you have time to prepare, the truth of it is I can win any argument. You know what I mean? Anybody can win any argument with enough research, enough prep time. You know what I mean? You can Yeah, you can really figure things out. You can look up other people's arguments. You can present them forward, and it's really not that hard. What's harder to do is on the day to day. As you're walking around talking to people that your coworkers. It's harder to have an appropriate conversation. You know what I mean, in which everything makes sense, and that's why part of why this podcast, and I wanted to do it. I've already said this before. Is like in my mind, I have a lot of ideas that roll around. You know what I mean? But if I'm not talking to anybody else, I can't put the right appropriate words out there that are gonna actually connect. You know what I mean? And you need to figure that out, and the only way you can figure that out is by actually practicing talking with somebody else.
It is important to have good ideas. It is important to be able to articulate those ideas. It is important to be able to put forth a good argument for those ideas. So yeah. We would not say that it's not important. That is really important. Yeah. But if you're talking to someone, you want to maintain a relationship with that person that you may not have similar ideas with.
Oh yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I was just watching a video where they were talking about different types of communication and everything, and how different people communicate in different ways, especially when it comes to like work-wise and things like that. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. Similarly, though, mm-hmm. Art, yeah, mm-hmm. Our it's we tout freedom of speech, you know what I mean, and we're really big on the government shouldn't make laws against speech basically, and I end up feeling kind of the same way about art. You know what I mean? I kind of hate censorship. You know what I mean? That's one of the things that I really don't like. I really think basically, everything should fly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And let the good ideas and the good stuff win over the bad ideas. But anyways, you have an art degree though. Why don't we do a little bit of that? What's your? But mm-hmm. specifically, photography was mostly the focus of your art degree.
Yeah. So let me be clear. If I was my dad, sorry, Dad. I would have told me not to go pursue that degree. So I, you know what I mean? So, but I did pursue that degree. It was emphasis in photography. I didn't know anything about drawing, painting, and all that stuff. Okay. 3D art, that wasn't my forte, but I got into it because at the time you either go into like photojournalism or before everyone had a camera on their phone, right? Yeah. You either go into photojournalism or you go into art with an emphasis in whatever. And I had an emphasis in photography, right?
Yeah.
I never even used that degree, when it came to my real job at all. I worked in supply chain I worked in retail and then supply chain for many years,
Yeah, but for a while we had our own kind of photography company. Where we took we went and took pictures at baseball games, mm-hmm. and for just a variety of a couple things.
Team shots, stuff like that. Huh? Team shots for the baseball, softball teams and stuff like that. Yeah. We did. Yeah, we did that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the whole family was involved in that endeavor. I always, and I think you did too. I think pretty much our family in general has. Has this entrepreneurial mindset, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we kind of do.
But I have to pay insurance and I have to keep my, my family afloat too at the time when they're young. Yeah. So what do? You do that side hustle on the side, and then, and you have fun with it too, but it was a lot of work. And then you have your real job that's paying the bills and making sure you have insurance, right?
Yeah, of course.
So it's a life choice, right? But yeah, it was in art, it was in art. And then I don't know let me just kind of just speak openly about this, because you mentioned, I think on the last podcast or maybe a couple of podcasts ago, that was one of the subjects you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then I asked you earlier today, probably not even an hour ago, I said, hey, what do you want to talk? What are we going to talk about on this podcast? Because it's his brainchild. And he said, I think I want to talk about art today. And I said, okay, sounds good. I have my opinion on it. I've never articulated it. So as I go through it, right, you may have the same, but as I go through it, I may be kind of formalizing my thoughts into words that I've never really spoken because
that's what I love about this podcast. That's what I love about it. Like I said, because there's lots of things, you know what I mean, that I keep in my mind, you know what I mean, well, or I'll try to mention it to friends or something like that, you know what I mean, but sometimes it's not easy because. Once again, I've explained this before. The way my brain works, you know what I mean, is I can think of a subject or a topic, and I instantly know the definition of it. I don't have to describe it, so I can easily go from topic to topic to topic really quickly in my own mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyways,
well, here's here's from my perspective, like what I'm going to try to work through here, on today's podcast, is like, how does someone look at art biblically? And that may mean, like, how do you look at, if you're going to be an art major, how do you look at certain aspects of the doing of the art? How do you look at aspects of the art itself that's already done that you may or may not know the artist who did that? I think both of them, maybe we can walk through those examples. It's also just that kind of what is good art, what is not good art. I'm sorry, you had one thing that you said on the last podcast, where you were talking about, like, our art versus like the animal kingdom per se, and I used honeycombs as an example, or and now it was fleet. It was like 2 hours ago I was thinking about this, but or a few hours ago today I was thinking about this. Anyway, and I can't even think of what I was trying to say. But anyway, but it had to do.
Nature is obviously really, really, really beautiful.
It is,
but it doesn't necessarily give across a meaning or a story in and of itself. It's the result of the story, right? Is what nature is. Whereas what we can do as humans when we create art is we can actually tell the story itself.
Yeah, and I think you probably said it better than I could. Where sometimes we do art for art's sake, right? In the past, a lot of the art was actually done as a contractual thing, right? You think of the Sistine Chapel, different things like that. It was the contract with maybe certain people or the church. There were a lot of good art that was done back then. Whether you agree with the church at the time, that's a whole different discussion. You know what I mean? But the art that was contracted, and those artists actually may have spent their whole life doing a certain piece. What is that? We could talk about the piece, just the piece in and of itself. Now you may have to talk about it within the context too, but I think for me, how I would approach it, look through it, is one thing again is the art in and of itself, but it's also, think about these nuances of art, and it's back to being a college kid, going to college, and think about this, like having to take new drawing, as a Christian, how do I look at that? How do I process that? Right. And how do I go about it? Now, I would never say, how do I figure out how to do it? I would say you first, in something like that, you figure out if you should do it first. If the answer is in your conscience, because there's certain things that God has told us, absolutely not. And then there's other things that he gives us the freedom to kind of, to decide, I guess, ourselves to do, right? He gives there's freedom in Christ, right? If without faith it is sin, the Bible tells us that. So how do I, if I'm gonna do it, I have to, if I'm gonna do it or not gonna do it, I have to make sure that I carve out that path and I say, if I say I'm not going to do it, then I don't do it, right? But remember, in these endeavors, it's never how am I going to do it and how am I going to like fit the Bible into it. I'm going to say, should I do it? Can I do it? And then if it's a can, then it becomes, well, okay, should it be something that I go about pursuing because maybe it's my passion? Well, how do you go about that as a Christian if in fact that's something that you say, well, I'm okay doing it. I'm okay going to these nude. I mean, that's probably the most extreme example, I would say.
I don't know about that.
Well,
that's pretty tame.
Well, there's more. There's more out there where there's people that are doing that did in the past. Like
yeah.
Well, I mean, let me get. I don't want to be grotesque. They peed on the canvas, and they did art, and then they peed on the canvas of Christ. I think, and they're saying that that's
there are
art.
Also depictions like was it Bach? Right? He made like some really, really just strange depictions of hell. You know what I mean? That are just absolutely wild.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they look. I mean, they're so weird. You know what I mean? That they anyways. The thing is, what you're talking about, though, I think you're talking about individual discernment, right? It's like like you said, there are some things that are obviously in the Bible, no goes, you know what I mean? But then there are some things in the Bible where it's like, if you have the mental capacity and you have the fortitude and the gumption to do something, then and you can do it in the right way. There's a great quote by somebody who was talking about playing Satan. It was like an actor. He was talking about playing Satan. He says, you don't.
Was he a Christian, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. He's a Christian.
Okay.
He's a Christian because he says, you don't try to play Satan. Mm-hmm. You don't, you don't try to emulate him. What you do is you ask God, how do I do this? How do I portray Satan? And that's a better way to go about it. Is to ask God how should I portray him? And then you get the answer, and then you.
These are interesting conversations because it goes into okay, that guy, I don't even know who you're talking about, but basically he made a decision to go ahead and do it. Sounds like okay. And we as Christians, and some Christians, I mean, would ask the question, or not ask the question. They would say, "How dare that person do something like that?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's where freedom in Christ comes in. You know what I mean? Now, whatever you do, you shouldn't be a stumbling block to another Christian. But what does that really mean, being a stumbling block to other Christians, right? So can we do those things?
Yeah.
And do we have the freedom to do those things? Yes. But should we be a stumbling block? Should we not be a stumbling block to other Christians? Yes, but doesn't mean that he couldn't do that particular thing. I would say in the short context I have, I would say he probably has the freedom to do it according to God in the Bible, to do something as crazy as that.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes into my thought a long time ago, because I was thinking about this, right? I remember it was a good friend of mine. I call him Dill Pickle because his name kind of rhymes with that, but that's beside the point. So I come up with names like, a nephew of mine, his name's Anthony, and so we go Tony, and then we say Tony Baloney, and then Baloney Man. Hey, Baloney Man. That's how my brain works, right? So I call him Baloney Man. So, but anyway, how am I trying to formulate this? It basically goes in the freedom that we have in Christ. But I remember this guy, a good friend of mine, telling me that, hey, there was this guy that got saved, and he was working in a liquor store, right? And then he continued to work in the liquor store, like kind of across, as a cashier.
Yeah.
Preaching to people that would come up, right?
Yeah.
Well, the question that people would ask, right?
Should you be working in a liquor store?
Yeah. Should you?
Oh, come on.
Should you? No. I mean, honestly, it's like, wait, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be doing that. And my thought is, there's probably there are lines you can cross, but that is. That is something that I would say that you have the freedom to do. Honestly, what I mean? You're not selling something illicit. You're selling something that people consume, that Christians, and we talked about it, can can consume as long as they don't get drunk. That's really
Yeah.
the biblical precedent
That's
for that.
part of that discernment
So-
too, right? So it's the same thing when we're talking about the art here.
Exactly.
You're
It goes into
Yeah.
how do you look at it? How do you do it? Do you do it, right?
Yeah,
And how do you,
yeah,
if so,
yeah.
how do you do it?
Do you? Yeah.
What's your approach, right?
You might not have the mental capacity where you should be doing it. Maybe you should be doing something else. You know what I mean? Or maybe you should be finding something better use of your time or something like that.
If you're looking honestly, if you're a young kid and you're looking at a naked lady that's in front of you in the art class, and you just and you know that you shouldn't be, then you may have to pursue art in a different manner. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have to as an individual have that spiritual discernment. You have to.
I understand that. Yeah, but then Now on the positive side, here's the reason why you can do it. You know what I mean? Is like our bodies are a work of art. They're something that God created, right? And if you believe that the creation is sacred and once again, if we're made in the image of God, you know what I mean? So this is a God, this is an image of what God in general would choose for himself as well. So there's something divine about the body itself. So once again, we talk that's right. We talked about it on the podcast with Allison. When I talked to Allison on there, I said, you look at the statue of David, the statue of David. He's nude, you know what I mean? But it's an incredible statue, right? It's like this idealistic version of the human body, you know what I mean? In this like perfectly twisted form that it's like it's a crazy great piece of artwork, you know what I mean? And so you can see how you can still celebrate these things, with without getting dirty with it, you know what I mean? I don't know how far out getting sinful or dirty with it. You know what I mean?
One thing about me too, and again, all I have is an art major. I took some art history classes. I have my opinion. That's really it in a nutshell. That's it. I can't tell you that I remember all the history classes. I can't even. I think it was Michelangelo that did David. I can't even remember at the time. But I know the statue you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're talking about. There was during that time. It was like, okay, how big should the head be in relationship to the body? Should it be 1/7, 1/6, or whatever? And the pose though, the hand, the way he has the hand down the body is just and him twisted.
Yeah, he's twisted slightly, so it accentuates like his abs and the way they turn and everything to make it. And it still looks
I'm jealous of
amazing.
that six pack to this day, But he has his hand just relaxed down his side, and it's amazing. And the hand, speaking of the body too, and the reason they have nudes up there. I hate to press this issue. That's not the point, but But it's because of just the uniqueness of the body. And if you can draw the hand and the arms, especially the hand and the toes and stuff like that, then if you can do that well, then you can do a lot of other things in art very well. So
this is like the hand is incredibly complex. I mean, there's so many things, like little pads here, and the way that certain lines create, when they fold and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly complex.
Now, looking at art, I mean, and I don't even know if this is the path you want to go, but I have an interesting quick story. My sister, anyway, I have relatives that come here every once in a while, and my sister came out here. And we went to one of the local art museums, and it's a pretty kind of a renowned art museum, right? You get in the Midwest, and there's a bunch of museums around, right?
Yeah.
Pretty renowned art museum. So we went there, and just because it's in the art museum, that's what I'm going to say. Just because it's in the art museum doesn't mean you have to like every piece, right?
Yeah, of course.
And there are beautiful pieces there, especially some paintings, right? But there's an example of this. Actually, there's two examples, but the one specifically, it looks like a silver turd. on the floor.
Yeah, I know,
You know
exactly
what I mean?
which one you're talking about.
And we were walking by, and it's just sitting on the floor, and it's been there. I think the museum must own it. It must not. And I look every time I look at that, I'm like, what the heck? How in the world can this be considered art? Now, you can, as an artist, talk all day long you want about it, and it may actually bring some validity, more validity to a piece than less, right? But if I don't like it at first, you're gonna have a hard time convincing me that is a necessary piece of art. So So there's another thing about looking at the art piece and going, okay, can we look at it? But it's another thing to go to a museum. I know I'm just weaving a bunch of crap in here, but you look at something and you're like, do I even like that? And is that really like, how is that considered art? So much so that they have it in the museum as a prominent
and it's
piece.
worth like $100,000 or something like that. Anyway, but the point
it's crazy.
is a little bit. Bring it back a little bit though. Is we were talking about the way art can tell stories, and this is why art's art and not nature, right? Which it pulls back to my questions from before, like is society evil or something like that? There's other like existential parts of this, of this discussion of art. You know what I mean?
You really like art in general. You are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had opened up by saying, I think. It's just like freedom of speech in my mind. It's like nothing should be censored. Like everything should be allowed. There shouldn't. I can't stand censors anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I told you I collect the heavy metal magazines, right?
Yeah, you talked about that.
And
one time.
I forget. I think I had seen like someone had just posted just the cover of one of them, you know what I mean? And it didn't have any nudity on it. Didn't have any. I think it was like, a guy with like a sword, like, stabbing a dragon or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they took down the post and they flagged it because it was, I guess it was just a little too violent or something like that. It was really weird. Like it caught me off guard when I saw it. I'm like, wait a minute now. Like why did that one get flagged? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, so if you think about forums like that, right? Actually, if you post something on the forum and they have these rules that they have, they do have these rules, and then how do they define those rules when it comes to something like that? That's a difficult one. Now when it comes to, but on the flip side. And I do not like censorship either. I really don't. I have a hard time when even someone on the liberal side, the people on the conservative side, they say the person on the liberal side does or says something really obscene or stupid, and the people on the so-called conservative side are asking for this person's job, right? Because they might have did it in the context of their job.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, I have a hard time with that. But all that said, the question is, let's just say there is no censorship at all, period. Yeah. Does that mean as a Christian, there may still be Christian guidelines that me as an individual can or shouldn't participate in, or should have that discernment. So everything not censored. How do you still, as a Christian, how do you go about that, right? Yeah. You
navigate the world the same way you do in nature, right?
You do, and
everything else.
Here's, by the way, I mean, I'm going to put a plug in for Four Eyes Furniture. So if we're talking about art too, we may think of paintings, we may think of the things we're talking about. What about furniture pieces? What about anything like your craft? Like I do things with if I'm a certain person that does things with my hands, and I put up a simple fence, but I do something a little different than other people because I'm thinking outside the box. Yeah, is that art? I was going to bring up a wealth of other mediums, right? I mean, you have like animes, you have movies, you have
music. You
Mhm.
got there's literally just a ton. There's like Americana,
Mhm.
like if you're like on American Pickers, that show where they go
Mhm.
around, they find like old signs, for like old oil companies or gas stations and things like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
bringing those over, like the old Conoco signs. Those are art, you know.
Now, how are they art? How do you like
Yeah,
how do you think
yeah,
they're
no,
art?
no,
I'm just
no.
asking you. You know,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not a
that's
loaded
I mean
question.
that's part of this that's the whole yeah, that's part of the whole discussion right there. Yeah, it's like, what is art, you know what I mean? See, when someone just takes a selfie with their phone, you know what I mean? Is that art, or you know what I mean? Cuz really the Conoco signs,
Mhm.
which we would consider art now, but at the time they're really just like a logo. See, is the McDonald's logo, is that a piece of art? Is the Taco Bell logo a piece of art? You know what I mean?
Is their food healthy? That's a whole different
Yeah, that's a whole
discussion.
different
No, no, I'm just
discussion. You
kidding.
know what I mean? But as you drive, as
Mm,
you drive down, and this is one thing. This is where I start to think the world is like kind of dystopian. Is I drive down the main strip. You know
mhm.
what I mean? There's just a ton of fast food restaurants on both sides. And you
Yeah.
see that. You've seen that in like some of those Midwest towns, like
Oh yeah.
little bit
So
further out.
some of them allow higher signs. Have you noticed that? And then you go through another town like, where's the fast food restaurant? I'm hungry. And you can't find the doggone thing. Because you want to spot it. You don't want to put it on your phone.
Yeah,
But
that's right. The ones where it's a
mm,
main highway going right through the town, you know what I
yeah,
mean? There's
and
like
they're
they
like
allow
100.
big signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like really big signs to stop people, to get them to get
Yeah.
some food or
But
something
anyway,
like
you were
that.
talking.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. Well, I mean, gives us information, it tells us a story. There's all sorts of things that make art, you know what I mean? And then there are certain things about those pieces of art, you know what I mean, and how they make you feel, you know what I mean? Does the Taco Bell logo make you feel hungry? Does the Conoco symbol make you want to go get gas? You know what I mean, for your car?
I think the point is art is bigger than what we think sometimes, right? And I don't think this is a
For
hard
sure.
stretch. It's bigger than what we think, but how do you look at something like that when you're back when you're a Christian and you're doing something and you're doing your craft from a biblical vantage point, if you're doing it right,
Yeah.
you're working with your hands, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing a craft, that in essence, in its core foundation, is a good thing. And should everything that I do be unto the Lord? Yeah, that is a foundational thing. But then, when it comes to, I love looking at furniture videos, how people go about doing their things,
Yeah.
because to me, to me, that's art. I think maybe the way we ought to look at stuff like that, right? Is not, is it art? Well, I mean, I don't think it's really either or. I shouldn't say that. But sometimes we look at it, look at something, we say, is that art? That's a good question. Is it healthy art? I don't know just yet. maybe you can tell me otherwise. If it is a
Yeah.
simple,
Well, I
but
mean,
hold on. I
oh,
was
you
going to say,
could.
but on the on the flip side, I'm just saying this. Maybe we could just say there's a lot more things that are art out there, but some of it's just bad art. I don't know.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah, yeah,
mean?
for
Or
sure, for sure.
there's a different level
There's
of how
sometimes when
good it is. I don't know.
Yeah, there's
Anyway.
sometimes when someone's trying to create art, and obviously it's bad, right? But then there are other things too, like so this table, for example, right? You're saying furniture as art, but this table is basically just functional. It's
It,
very
it's
ergonomic. You know what I
it's
mean?
like, yeah,
It serves its purpose, and that's
that's what it does.
basically it. So
Yep. And
you
and is
wouldn't
and
call
is
this art.
no, I wouldn't, because I mean this is thin particle board, and it's done as cheaply as possible. You know what I mean? So it's a functional piece. That's
Yeah.
that's what it is. That is what it was intended to do. And I don't think anyone came in here out of the box. They actually just copied what was there before and
Yeah.
just made it so they could do it and mass produce it.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. We're talking about these ideas, an idea here of like what is art,
Mhm.
right? And you can apply that to other things that we've talked about in the past as well. Right? The world is much deeper than what like some people look at. Like some people just look at this as a table, but what is a table?
Mhm.
there's nothing that you can say is specifically a table, but you know a table when you see it. The
Mhm.
same thing with art, right? You can't say specifically what art is. You can't point to one thing and be like, that is the entirety of art itself. That
Mhm.
is art. Like I would say, you are Phil, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing I can point to and say that is art, but I can look at a lot of things and say they are artwork, or they are pieces of art, or they
Mhm.
are art, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in that sense. So this painting is art, but this isn't the entirety of
Mhm.
art. There's something else, a deeper spirit, I guess you would call it, you know what I mean, or a deeper
Well, you talked
idea.
about emotion, right? Before,
Yeah,
does it was it something that someone did out of emotion? These three pieces I love.
yeah,
I love these three pieces, right?
yeah,
Did they do it out of emotion? Maybe. I think there's something to be said about it, but I think more importantly, when it comes to art, does it invoke something within that person that's looking at it, right?
yeah, yeah, that's true.
um and whether it's heavy motion or whether it's just the coolness factor, you know what I
Yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah,
whether you can verbalize it or not, because I've been in several art classes where we had to like verbalize it. I think there's a good exercise doing that, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes I look back and I'm like, sometimes art for art's sake is fine, and you don't have to. There's no thing that you can verbalize to make it better,
hmm,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Some things it may be a little different, but certain pieces are just good.
yeah,
Makes sense, you
yeah,
know? And it doesn't take, like, you and I could look at, we could have 100 people, and pretty much those 100 people would say, you know what, that piece is good.
yeah,
And you don't even have to articulate. Others, you'd have a 50-50 split, and you may have to have a dialogue about it. Whether it's art, I'm talking about a piece that is
yeah.
supposed art, but whether or not people like it, or it evokes any type of emotion, good or bad, or just like evoke, is that a word? Yeah,
Yeah,
evokes
yeah.
evokes emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Well, so you're reminding me kind of, and I had kind of mentioned anime as an art
Mhm.
form earlier, right? There's a really great movie called Perfect Blue, and me and Allison have watched it together, and she really loves it. I really love it, but it's very, very specifically, they're trying to evoke the emotion of like uncomfortability in you. Like it's specifically trying to make you uncomfortable. And it's so apparent when you watch it that it's purposely trying to do that. It's great how they do it. They treat it like with like the utmost respect, because what the story is about in this anime, it's a girl who is trying to become a movie star,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so the way she's going about it is she's basically joining like a Law and Order type movie or TV show. And in that there's a scene where she gets raped,
Mhm.
right? Now she's just an actress, but they play the rape scene, right? And they cut back and forth as they're filming it, right? So
Mhm.
it's showing what the camera is seeing, and then they like, you hear the director yell cut, cut, and then all of a sudden everybody's acting normal again, and it messes with your mind. Like, it
Mhm.
is so uncomfortable to watch. Like,
Mhm.
but it's like incredibly like respectful to the source idea of what's happening here. It's like, like, this is a really uncomfortable scene to film, but
Mhm.
these are actors that are doing it. How do they feel about it? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, it is
Mhm.
weird. It is so weird, and it
Yeah.
it, it really, really, it's one of those things where you watch it and it really cranks you up, man.
These are things. So I've never seen that. I've never. I don't even know if I've watched much anime at all.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
or I was gonna say any anime, but then I started thinking of this kind of cartoon one that we watched with Callahan when he was younger. It was kind of cool, you know.
Huh, yeah.
But the point is that those would be things that, back to my perspective, that that I wouldn't advise another Christian to see. I just wouldn't do it. I would be like, I wouldn't advise them to go see. But But you do bring up something, and I can't remember the specifics in terms of art pieces right now. But
well, I don't think you should show it to your kids. But I think as an adult, if if you're with your wife, I think it's a good one to see, because it definitely it makes you kind of like think about how, like, it gives you like a woman's perspective on like day-to-day life, and like trying to navigate like a world that we currently live in, where like there's cameras everywhere, and everybody's got like an internet page, and everybody's and because like one of the things that happens in the movie is there's like a guy that's stalking her. He's like a fan of hers, but he takes it a little too far. And eventually, it's a movie, so eventually it gets really crazy by the end, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's a great movie. Like, I wouldn't say it's off limits. I wouldn't say it's something that's off limits for a Christian to see.
I think so. Yeah, that's I don't know. I've never seen it. I've never seen it, but I'm not saying off limits. I'm just saying should that person do it? That individual person, should they do it? And would I advise the Christian to go do it? Especially if I know that Christian may have a certain personality or whatever. I can't do that. Now
it goes back to the discernment.
Well, it's discernment on both sides. It's discernment for me to say, should I advise a person to go see it, or should I even talk about it? And it's discernment on that other person, if they know about this, should they see it? That's one thing. But one thing I want to point out is that there are, when it comes to good art pieces, I'm not saying all art pieces are like that. Some are just beautiful in and of themselves. But a lot of art pieces do have a lot of good art pieces, I should say, have a little bit of edge or anxiety to it.
Yeah.
Right? On purpose, right? The ones that are done kind of on purpose sometimes are more... I'm not saying they're more meaningful, but basically they're more memorable, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not I don't think it's a bad thing to have that tension, I guess, art tension, right? And you think about a piece that is more memorable, it may have tension in it. You mentioned the movie Keanu Reeves and
Devil's Advocate.
The Devil's Advocate,
yeah.
where
that's one I don't know if I'd advise a Christian to go see.
Except you'd advise me to see. No. And I'm going to watch it with you.
Maybe if you're alone and you're really bored, No. I mean,
but you're saying what you kind of described. I guess I haven't seen it yet. Is that there's an edge to it all the way through where there's anxiousness. And one other thing I just want to mention. Just real quick, and it has to do with one of my favorite. Honestly, I'm starting to appreciate it more. Is The Godfather, right? And I can't remember remember which one it was, but it was Al Pacino in church having his baby baptized. Do you renounce Satan? And in the background, like they keep going back and forth to him in church and the people that he's commissioned to go kill people and what's going on at that time, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you renounce? And the whole thing is about baptizing his kid to present him to God, and then him renounces Satan, while at the same there was tension there. While at the same time, he has his hands are clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he has already commissioned people to go kill his his enemies, but also his competition, right?
Yeah, the symbology of his, the symbology and then of his soul, you know what I mean, and how they're diametrically opposed, and the real person is behind the scenes, whereas this is all just an act. You know what I mean?
He's going to take care of his kid, and he's going to present his kid to God. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because that's what you could go all sorts of different directions.
Yeah.
Maybe because that's what he does as a good Catholic, or that's what he knows he should do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's going about, taking care of business in a very evil way. It's just crazy. But anyway, but the tension that I don't think you use the word tension, but that, well, maybe you did.
Uncomfortableness.
Uncomfortableness or the tension that you have in art. That was an artful movie. Series really, but that was an artful scene. And then you have other things in art where it's just a painting this doesn't have any tension to me. This is just it has a cool factor, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so again, how do you as a Christian look at these things? How do you decide what not to see, what to see? You know, Mom and I we were in Washington, D.C., and we only spent like 40 minutes, half hour, maybe an hour. I can't remember, but we were out in Washington, D.C. with the group and the group was, you know, we were kind of touring with the group, so you had to actually kind of abide to their schedule more or less, but we had some free time, and we walked down the street to, I think it was called like the Washington Museum. I can't remember the name of it, but we walked, as soon as we walked in, we saw a Renoir, and we were like, oh my gosh, you know, like we saw the 3D ballerinas, we saw the Thinker, you know, we saw different art pieces, different artists, like right off the bat, we're like, these are here, and then we got to just kind of browse the museum. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you that it does evoke emotion. You see these things in books, and then you see them live, and it's more amazing. You see we saw the I can't think of the guy's name right off the top of my head, but basically he was a painter for like the New Yorker magazine, I think is what it was.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But anyway, he had a traveling exhibit, and we saw that in the local museum. Okay, and it's amazing cool. when you see these pieces that you've never seen before. That's one thing, and then you see the pieces that you're familiar with, but you see them live, and you realize the paint strokes and the color is much more vibrant, and the paint strokes tell a story, right? On how are they able to take these paint strokes and make that image such as what it is. It's amazing. So that doesn't tell, you know, I'm just talking about art, but and my gut check on art, but again, you know, how do you go about looking at that?
So here's an interesting thing, right? So
I'll think of his name soon.
Yeah, sorry. When we talk about like God, right? So when God created us, He knew we'd be creating art, right? He obviously like programmed it into us or something like that. I mean, literally from caveman days, literally from way back then, they were painting stuff on the walls, you know what I mean? Like cool things, like stories. Once again, stories are pretty huge of, you know, them doing a hunt, you know, hunting down a bison or hunting down an elephant or
the caves in France, you know what I mean, where they did stuff like that, or even the things on stone, right, where it was like a lot of this stuff was to commemorate maybe the king or the whoever or the pharaoh or whatever at the time. It was commemorate his major battles, like his major milestones, right?
Yeah.
You look at that, well, it was written as history, but the graphics are such that the people that are looking at it today, they say, oh, this had to do with this particular event at this time that this person conquered this kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would I say that? Would you say that's art?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So now it's really interesting though, knowing all that you know, that it's so ingrained into us, and that it goes back to this idea that God's sovereignty like rules over man's will or something like that. It's like all this art exists. Now you say, you know, as Christians, you know, we shouldn't engage in some arts, but like, you know, God created or gave those ideas to people to create. So all the artwork in some way is from God. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the,
you get what I'm saying? Well, like I'm trying to piece it out. This goes back. This is back at my argument on God's sovereignty, right? It's like everything is permitted to be here by God, because if it wasn't permitted to be here, then it wouldn't be here, because God wouldn't allow it to be here, right?
I don't quite agree with that. I don't. I think because there are thoughts in our head that God condemns us, even our thoughts, right? So does that mean that God?
But
that
our
God
thoughts
put
are not our own, though.
Well, that's another argument. That's another thing that you're saying that may not be true. Is my point, right?
Okay.
And that's all I'm saying. So because if you have that premise, then like you said, anything goes. if I was to say that there are thoughts that God says these are evil thoughts that you need to, not have, how do you not have those? That's a whole different conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if there are thoughts that are evil, I would say that God hasn't given those to you and God hasn't sanctioned. Now he allows certain things in, and then we'd have to argue, well, why does he allow those things to happen? That's a different discussion. But the fact that they're there doesn't mean that God has sanctioned the goodness of that. Does it make sense?
Ooh, goodness. Yeah. I totally agree with that last sentence that you just said. God doesn't sanction the goodness of something, right? But then there's he allows evil, like artwork in this case. He allows evil artwork because it serves a purpose. You know what I mean?
No. Well, I'm not sure. Again, that is that goes back to what is like. Is there something that that we say is right and wrong, or something that we should or shouldn't participate in? Right? If I have art, like why would you call it evil art? And then the question I would have is that if you, and I can't recall anything out there, but if you have something that's considered evil art, then did God sanction it? Did God, I mean, again, back to, and it is offensive, but back to, painting a crucifix. I think it was like, this was decades ago. And I think it was some guy painting a crucifix. It wasn't at my school, by the way, but it was, an artist. We actually had a little bit of a discussion on it. I can't remember what I said or if I said anything, but what I was thinking even at that time was people were arguing whether or not it was art, right? Or whether or not it was a good thing. I think but it was a painting of the crucifix, and then he peed on it, and the museums took it and hung it on their wall. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think God sanctioned that. That person did something that because they were not, how do I put it? At the time, that was a known artist who was either an atheist or couldn't stand Christianity.
Yeah.
Well, and so, should now, am I got?
You're saying sanction.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the crux is in that word.
Mm-hmm.
What is sanctioned, right? Because I mean, if something exists, that's not sanctioned, right? But
it was okay, yeah, maybe that's the wrong word, but it was accepted by people as something that was okay. I should say, and I would say I'm not going to go, have banners at the guy's house and all that stuff. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But can I say, you know what? That was it was obvious that this person he already talked about hating Christianity. It was obvious that he had this artwork that displayed it. And should I say that I'm going to endorse it? Would I pay for it and put it on my wall? No. If I was a museum owner, you know what I mean?
Of course.
Would I buy it and put it in my museum? Even if the painting was absolutely the best around.
Yeah, no.
I would say no. For me as a Christian. Now.
Yeah.
But if you're non-Christian, you're going to look at it different.
I got the discernment, and I totally agree with you.
You get that.
I get that part.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm trying to go back to this God thing, where right, where does art come from, right? Where, and maybe the deep, and because I think this will mirror, you know what I mean, the where do like ideas even come from, or something like that, right? So like, I have thoughts that come into my mind all the time that are not my own. They didn't come from me. I didn't ask for them. I don't want to think them. You know what I mean? They just come.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's maybe we can talk about why do you think they're not your own, but go ahead.
Well, yeah. I mean, the follow up of that is the same thing with art, right? Is sometimes people are compelled to like do something. You know what I mean? And I mean, gosh, I guess you could call it possession. You know what I mean? It's like some people are literally, you know what I mean? You know what I mean, right?
We talked a little bit about this when it comes to music. I remember that, a couple of discussions we had,
I mean, the story of Leonard Cohen writing Hallelujah is insane.
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds like the dude is possessed. I mean, you've seen it other times too. And actually, when I play music and I'm really in it, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? I'm really just feeling it.
Mhm.
Like there's no thoughts. It just kind of just happens, and you just kind of like let it happen, and
Mhm.
it just happens. I don't know. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unless you know how to do it, you know what I mean? And it's not something you do often either, because it kind of really like drains your mind, you know what I mean? It
Mhm.
really hurts. But it's the story of Leonard Cohen. If people don't know the story of Leonard Cohen writing Hallelujah, he's like in his underwear in in a hotel room on the ground
Yeah.
with like piles of paper that he's like scribbling the words on, trying to scribble the words on. And he's like his like basket is overflowing with like crumbled up pieces of paper that he keeps throwing away, and he's literally like sobbing trying to figure out how to write it down right. You know what I mean? So it's weird. It's like he's trying to capture a moment. And see, things like there are other artists, you hear them talk about that. That's what it's
Mhm.
like for them. It's like this like it's like a labor. That's why they call it labor of love, right? It's like they're literally. So what is that? What is that? Is that evil? Is it good? You know what I mean? Does it, on one hand, does it come from God? Because Hallelujah, that
Mhm.
song, I mean, went on and like other people rewrote it. And it was a big thing in Christianity for a while where like every church that I went to sung that song. You know what I
Really,
mean?
they sang that song? That was not even.
Well, they wouldn't sing
Yeah.
Leonard
Yeah.
Cohen's version. They'd
Yeah.
sing there was another version, like somebody else redid it. You know what I mean?
Did,
They'd
did
sing
they
other
keep
version.
the lyrics as such?
They kept the majority of the lyrics, but they changed a few of them. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh man, we're weaving and ebbing and flowing.
Yeah, I
This is
know.
an
Well,
interesting discussion
I'm
because
trying to get to something here where
Mm.
I'm trying to figure out something a little bit deeper that I wrestle with that I can't figure out, because like I said, I play music
Yeah.
and I feel it, you know what I mean? And then I question it afterwards. I'm kind of like, what was that, man? Was that a
Here-
good thing or a bad thing?
Here's-
It
yeah.
sounds really good.
Here's-
but man,
here's-
it hurts my mind. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying?
Here's my simple answer. I don't know. No, that's
Yeah.
that's my bailout answer. No,
Well, for sure, I don't know either.
yeah, I don't know, but we've talked about I don't know, because I do think this. I mean, sometimes I don't really get like that, so I can't speak to that. No. So when I'm just doing something or getting into my music, I really wish that I knew how to play a musical instrument like a lot of people out there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Because the best guitarists and the best actors too, they tell you they are not acting. Instead, what they do is they basically take on like a spirit or something like that. They take on a completely different personality, get rid of themselves,
Okay.
and let that personality do all the work.
That's just weird. I mean, from someone who's a Christian that goes to church, that's just it's a weird thing to say, you know?
It is.
You
It
know?
absolutely is. That's
Yeah.
the whole point. That's what I'm trying to get across right here. Yes.
Yeah.
It is very weird. But everybody says those are the best actors, right? I mean, like
I know who you're going to talk about.
huh?
I know who you're going to talk about.
Which one?
I
I was thinking of three different. I was thinking of three different people. I was thinking of
Jim Carrey.
Val Kilmer,
Mhm.
Jim Carrey. Yes,
Carrey,
Jim
yeah.
Carrey. Now, Jim Carrey's one. People kind of argue against that one because specifically, in real life,
What movie are we talking
it's
about?
Man on the Moon. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
In real life, Andy Kaufman was friends with Jerry Lawler. But while they were filming it, Jim Carrey, as thinking that he was under the possession of Andy Kaufman, was kind of not nice to Jerry Lawler. And so it was one of those things where Jerry Lawler kind of says, it was whatever. He said he was really nice to him afterwards, but he's like, Andy Kaufman never treated me like that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, in that case, he's not really obviously possessed by Andy Kaufman. And you and I would agree he wasn't really possessed by Andy Kaufman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
But another one is speaking of Godfather,
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando. That's right. He was a method actor too. That's what it's called, by the way. It's called method acting, right?
Okay.
And what they do is they They take on this spirit and they shed themselves. That's what they say. But the thing is, it drives them crazy because Marlon Brando, by the end of his career, was an absolute nut job, right?
Okay.
He basically lost his mind. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Val Kilmer held off fine, but Jim Carrey basically seems to be a nut job now. You know what I mean? So what is it?
I don't know, because that would be 10 more podcasts down the road, because you'd have to argue like were they like that to begin with? Did this drive them back into a deeper place, where they were already kind of, at the shallows of that same place? I don't know. I don't know, because there's so many.
You just asked an incredibly great question. Were they really, because people are really good at hiding who they really are, right? Were they really crazy to begin with, and then they just hid it really well and enveloped themselves in society long enough that they were successful, and then afterwards they just didn't care anymore and they let themselves go back to crazy?
I mean, society. I'm not saying they like, but we're interested in enigmas in society, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They are the ones we're just totally interested in, and so we gravitate toward them. Now, how that thing or the person gets to be an enigma, I mean, that's a whole discussion, and I don't know where to even start with that. Now, if I took a step back to say, well, actually, let's not do that unless you want to, but it really has to do with our service. I'm not even going to tell you who I go to, but our service in our church is different than the old ones where they were non-denominational, right?
Yeah, of course.
Now, why am I bringing the two together? Because in churches that are mostly, I would say, the ones that are non-denominational and just let the music flow and let the people sing as loud as they can.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? And then let the lyrics be more Jesus is my boyfriend than Jesus is a sovereign being. You know what I mean? You start getting into that where churches get into mysticism. So I'm not saying, so we can get back into art. I just want to kind of just quickly say something here.
Well, no, that's very valid.
How do you as a church protect the body and kind of just say, okay, we're going to believe and preach the sovereignty of God. We're going to be Christocentric, and we are going to have music that doesn't feel like mystical, and have these lyrics that just really don't make too much sense about who God really truly is, right? So now that's in the church, right? So I like having a protection, because you as the lead pastor, you are the right. Again, we talked about this before. Christ is the good shepherd. Yeah. But these other people that are heads of the church, they are shepherds of the flock there. How do they protect those people? Yeah. One thing is they do it through how they go about the service and how they go about the music, because you can bring people outside of protection when you do that wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You got to have this baseline. I get why you keep doing this. You know what I mean?
I'm bringing you outside.
I understand why you totally do this, and it's made more and more sense as we continue to talk this. You always got to go back to this baseline to reestablish, you know what I mean, where the starting point is, right? Mm-hmm. Because anyways, it's a really interesting thing. Yes, you always got to come back to it.
I'm sorry, just real quick, and I'll let you speak. I felt like I've interrupted you too many times, but when it comes to, so it's interesting, because people out there are probably looking and listening to me, and they're saying, wait a sec, this is the same guy that said it's okay for someone to be a Christian and, need a liquor store or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? And he has the freedom to go to, to draw nudes or go to an art museum. Yeah, you may see a contradiction there in what I'm saying, and, there, and saying it was maybe at the time okay for me to do that. Would I do it now? That's a different story.
Yeah.
And then saying, well, in the walls of the church and how they perform service, it's real important that they basically protect the flock. So is there a contradiction in what I'm saying? I don't think there is, but maybe you can reconcile the two, or maybe you have something else to say about that.
No. Yeah, I mean, well, it's like I was just saying just a second ago. It's you got to come back to this baseline, right? There's a spot where you know you're protected, right? And you could absolutely live inside that protected area your entire life, and you'd be perfectly fine, and you know you're safe, and you know you're getting to heaven and everything like that, right? But some people want to explore out a little bit further, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. See, maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe that's why society is bad. That's the question. You know,
well, how do you? Well,
should you just be all the time? Ahead. Should you just be all the time trying to, stay in this perfect location? But see, the problem is then everything that we have, things like jokes, making fun of each other, things like that, like then you're starting to get outside of that perfectly safe bubble of where you know that you're being perfect. It's like you have to, you get what I'm saying?
I think I really get what you're saying.
This is why that first question or I guess it was the second podcast. This is why it was one of the first questions I asked. Is society evil? Because it's like does good art eventually lead to evil art? You know what I mean? If you think of it like a path, like a roadway or something that you travel down or something like that, you know what I mean? And you're going from like technology to technology, or you're going from art to art or whatever it is, as you keep going, is it eventually like, okay, like the Statue of David, we were talking about the Statue of David earlier, right? Could some people idolize that, and now you're breaking one of the 10 commandments because now it's an idol? You get what I'm saying?
Man, no, I do. So,
I've got these two spots, right, on the line of arguments where it's like everything's evil and then nothing's evil.
Well,
you know what I mean? It's like and I can make arguments for both.
And this isn't going to answer your question. I think you had a question out there. This isn't going to answer your question, but you and I had talked about music, and we were talking about like, why is it, if you think about it, why is it some of the people that were into drugs made some and it may be the
best music, the absolute best music.
It may be some of the Enigma stuff, right? Like the Beatles, Hold My Hand and all this other stuff before they kind of met Bob Dylan, I guess. I don't know who it was, or whatever. Yeah. As the story goes, I don't know. But anyway, was their music, was Abbey Road and then the album before that better because it was so different than the first stuff? Maybe it's just more of an enigma where it's out there. I don't know.
Yeah, or Sgt. Pepper and like Lucy in the Sky, where they're absolutely just smashed on acid.
I love Elton John's version of Lucy in the Sky better. Yeah, exactly. So how do you process that? Really, but here's what
I mean. The truth is, like, think of your favorite bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're all on drugs. All on drugs.
Some people would say, well, you don't even listen to it. Now, I'm just saying from a personal...
Yeah, exactly.
They say don't even go there. I would say, personally, I went through phases where it's like, I didn't know where I stood on this, right?
Yeah.
I would say, for me, it sounds really bad, but I mean, I've never been a big Led Zeppelin fan. Let's just talk about bands, right?
Yeah, Led Zeppelin, because they were in line with Aleister Crowley. Is that how you say his name?
Oh yeah, they may have been.
They bought his house. And
they did?
And they recorded inside his house, and they said
that's right.
They said it was absolutely demon possessed. You know what I mean? They like full on.
Yeah. That's crazy if you think about that.
Yeah.
Right? So actually, how long have we been going? I just want to say something.
An hour and 8. So.
Okay. Maybe we take a quick break and then continue a little bit, or maybe we ended up. I don't know. But here,
we could probably wrap it up here.
But here's what we talked about, and I don't know if this is true or not. And this isn't going to answer anyone's question out there. You know what I mean? but we talked about music. We talked about that, and like, why is it that is some music that we gravitate toward? Should we listen to it? And some of it for me is because I've heard, Christians in the past, they talk about the beat and how it's
Hypnotizing.
Yeah, not I was going to say mesmerizing, but
Yeah.
like it's hypnotic in and of
You
itself.
were just talking about mysticism within inside the church, and when they're playing music and stuff like
yeah,
that. As well.
exactly. So
Do you have to be careful about that?
Yeah, you have to be extremely careful, a lot
Yeah.
more than I thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you might, as a result, get into music that's kind of boring in church. You know what I mean? Because as a result of it, you know what I mean? And you're not like into this, this other music. But anyway, but how do you process that outside the church? Maybe when you're looking at that. But I would say, and I don't know if this is true or not. I would say just. It may be factual or not, but I would say some of the artists that weren't on drugs,
Mm-hmm.
they had more longevity. Right?
Oh, that's true.
Janis Joplin on drugs.
Yes.
Jimi Hendrix, I think he was only 3 years.
Yeah.
Right, on drugs.
Yeah, there's that whole 27 Club or 20 something where
less than 30.
Yeah. Where basically these specifically really famous big artists, got to a certain point and died basically really young.
Have I looked at Janis Joplin videos of her singing, Bobby McGee or whatever songs? Bobby McGee was written by someone else. I can't think of the guy's name. I think anyway, it was written by someone else.
Yeah.
I know his face, right? But the point being is that because of what Janis Joplin's life was like, I think this is maybe the question, can I listen to her music, right? Some people can't. I'm just saying personally, I can look at that because it's not like laced with these evil lyrics.
Yeah.
And maybe there's other, for me, it's probably more lyrical based. Like I'm listening to the lyrics and
is she singing about struggling, with something that's relatable and we can all understand it?
I think I think sometimes that's fine, but that's me personally. If you think that you're going to be
the art from the artist,
I think exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. I think if you're looking at music and you say, well, it's not good for me, and I'm a Christian, and it's not good for me, and it's hypnotic, and I can't listen to it because of that, then don't. I would say absolutely don't listen to it. I'm not going to talk you into listening to it, and I'm not. But I would say I can listen to Janis Joplin music, absolutely. Can I listen to Highway to Hell? I have a hard time listening to that, or
I've slowly gotten away from.
I just don't like, the lyrics kind of like I got to turn off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Running
you were talking
with
about Led Zeppelin.
Running with the devil. You know what I mean? Van Halen. You know what I mean? I have to. For me personally, I have to say no to that. That's just me. That's just me personally. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you what to do or what to say. But do I listen to the Doobie Brothers and Black Water? I mean, that is one of the best songs ever. I don't. I'm not giving guidelines. I'm just saying for me, I've ebbed and flowed, and I know that I'm not. Again, it's not hypnotic to me. I can separate the art from the artist, I think is what you just said.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that I think the ones that were less on, the drugs got into the Beatles, and then their basically longevity was not there after that time.
For sure.
Now,
for sure.
Can I say it's because of that? I think arguably yes, and then the short-term artists that came out were there just for a couple, 2 or 3 years, hit the road hard, and then died instantaneously or soon after that. What happened to Terry Kath of Chicago when they had the guitar and the horns together and made really good music? But in fact, I don't know if it was drugs, but he shot himself accidentally. They say,
I heard that story.
But how do you process that? But they admitted they were into drugs.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And they went, and if you ask me, their 80s music stunk after that. It was so popish and horrible, But what am I talking about? I'm just talking about how do you, as a Christian, how do you say this is okay for me?
Yeah, I think you made that point. Discernment is really is really powerful. You should really look at yourself. You should know yourself, and you should know what you feel you can and cannot do. And you should analyze that, and you should determine, you know what I mean, individually for yourself. You know, if you're out there listening or something like that, like really look at it and say whether you're mature enough to handle it, whether you have the spiritual maturity to handle it, and you know, yeah.
No,
or if it's if it's something that's going to cause you to sin, don't do it. You know what I mean? Or if it's something something that's going to cause you to have sinful thoughts or something like that, then walk away. You know what I mean? Go, you know, and it might, and other people might seem fine with it, and you might, and you know, maybe even people close to you might seem fine with it. You know what I mean? And don't do something. You know what I mean? Don't push yourself or something like that just because other people are okay with it.
Yeah, and back to my original, you know, if you look at it, you shouldn't say, how do I go about doing this biblically? You just say, should I do it? That's the first question, right? Should I even do it, and go from there, right? As a Christian,
knowledge is power. You know, be knowledgeable of what you are.
I don't know if we even. I mean, we talked a little bit about art, but I don't even know if this is how you wanted us to approach the subject.
No, it is. You know? It is. Well, once again, I want to bring in that theological, philosophical discussion of what this stuff is. Like I said, I still have this idea that I can make a really strong argument for. You know, we talk about, you know, these artists being on drugs, but the artwork is so good. You know what I mean? I love Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and there are some times when he sings it, and it is just so good. Oh
I was talking so on side. You know? Well, it's not a side note, but Callahan and I, again, we were in Barnes and Noble yesterday. You know what I mean? Why were we there? Because we had a little time between the time I picked him up. I pick him up once a week. He's my grandson. Yeah. But I pick him up once a week at school, right?
Yeah.
And he has that thing with you on Wednesday. Let's not approach that just yet because we talked about so many things.
Yeah.
But he goes with you every Wednesday at 6:00, and so there's a time gap, and he's old enough where I can drop him off early. But I just said, well, what do you want to do something to burn some time? And he said, yeah, I want to go to the bookstore. So we went to Barnes and Noble, and we were looking at vinyls, right? It's kind of the same thing where I was showing him like Sly and the Family Stone. I was like, oh my gosh, there's like 3 killer songs in this album. And so I had to play one on my phone. You know what I mean? Can't even remember which one it was, Dance to the Music or anyway. No, it wasn't that one. It was a different one. But I was playing it on the phone in Barnes & Noble like it's like a library in there, you know what I mean? And he was kind of embarrassed, and I was like, man, this is good music, you know? But there was a song by Kiss from a Rose by Seal. Right?
Oh, yes, I know.
I don't even know who he is, but that is, I told him, I said if, and he didn't know what song that was, and I didn't play that.
Yeah, it's
for
from
him,
the Batman movie. It's from Batman Forever.
But if you listen to that
it was
song,
like his one-hit wonder.
But it's to me, it's one of the most perfectly put together songs. As much as I like 70s folk and 70s rock, right? You know, it's one of the most put together songs. But back to the artists, the artists that have longevity, you may argue that they were the ones not on drugs. Rush, for example, right? There's other artists out there that had longevity. I mean, Neil Diamond, really good. You know, you know, people are like Neil Diamond. I mean, you know, that had longevity.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those people not on drugs versus the people on drugs that had really good music that were kind of enigmas in their time? The people that had the really good paintings might have been a little crazy.
Yeah. I
don't know how you deal with that. So you asked me that toward the beginning, and it's like, I don't have a good answer for you. Yeah. I don't. It's just the messy nature of human beings.
Yeah.
And how do we navigate that? It doesn't mean that we should isolate ourselves like monks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we can finish off here, and but I think we're basically, I think on the next episode, let's have a continuing conversation of this. But let's go more into what I was talking about before. This idea. You know, we'll pull away from the art more so, and then go into more of like we have ideas sometimes, and sometimes they're not our own, or sometimes we're sometimes people are possessed to do things. You know what I mean? So to
And
speak.
you loose term to this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking like actually demon possessed, or something like that. Actually, you remember me and Corey talked a little bit about that, about demon possession.
Oh, yeah.
It's so weird because like in my mind, I almost don't think it's a real thing, right? I think it's always a mental problem or it's always a mental break or something like that. But then once again, man, you hear those Catholic exorcists, and when you watch a video and you hear them talk, they are absolutely 100% convinced that what they saw was demonic. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
If you watch Catherine Crick out there, casting demons out of people, that's totally fake.
That's totally fake.
Those are actors. But I've seen,
yeah.
I have seen one or two in the past, some very crazy videos that make you wonder.
Make you wonder, exactly.
Make you wonder. Exactly. I do believe demon possession. I do believe it is a real thing. But what? What is it? Some people think Kenneth Copeland, who seems sane on stage. There's some preachers that say, I think he's demon possessed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that interview with him with that lady in front of his where she's asking about the airplane. His face is just like contorting and being weird, and like he's confronted with the truth.
Don't you ever? It's like, wait a second, I'm just asking you a question.
He's like snapping and changing personalities and stuff.
Yeah.
See, is that a mental break?
I don't know.
It an act? Yeah.
Again, I don't know. Is demon possession real? Yes.
That's the next episode.
Is he demon possessed?
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's a guy to stay away from. Yeah. But anyway,
for sure.
It's crazy. This is crazy because I don't have good answers for you. All
either.
I do is can tell you my thought process.
You'll have a whole weekend to think about it.
I don't have any answers. I just have maybe the way I navigate these things. And a lot of it is I don't know, but I'm going to stay away from it
because
or I don't know, but this music doesn't take me down a path that I think is ungodly.
For sure. But my argument is going to be. Let's end here. Okay. But my argument is going to be that okay, in order for things to happen, in order for the world to basically have ups and downs and to move forward, you have to have basically an enemy. You have to have an antagonist, right? When we write a book, when we write a story, right, there's a protagonist and there's an antagonist. If you don't have an antagonist, then nothing happens in the book, right? And so my argument is going to be like all the artwork that's bad or all these things where it happens, God is having it happen on purpose so that way stuff that way stories can be told, that way people can learn, because you can't learn anything if all you constantly have is this perfect safe world where you never are confronted by sin. You know what I mean? You have to be actually confronted by sin in order to grow, to learn, to
know what sin is, or
to even know. Yeah,
is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah. So, anyways, like I said, we'll talk about this more. I think this is where we should go on the next episode, unless you think it's too deep.
No, you're
it's a rough one.
You're the one that chooses the topic, and then we just kind of navigate from there. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't have good solid answers per se because
well, that's the point. That's why we got to work through it. We got to try to figure out a way. Don't just say I don't know, and then but try to see if there's some place where you can wiggle through to try to see if there's something else, something deeper that we can learn or we can figure out about it. You get what I'm saying?
Art is good. We started with art, so I don't know.
Yes.
I
love it. It's fun. It's super fun. See, that's those are the things I really wrestle with in my mind, right? And that's when I start breaking into that area where I'm asking about these really weird situations, like I said, like these actors who say, you know what I mean, the best actors, not the middle of the road actors. You ask every other actor who's the best actor, they all say Marlon Brando. They all say it. Okay. You know what I mean? Just hands down. That's their answer. Right. And so then you look at Marlon Brando, and Marlon Brando was a method actor who basically went crazy. So what does that mean? And so I
Don't
wanna know.
let your kids get into acting. That's what it
Yeah,
means.
it might
I
be.
don't know.
It might be. That might be the answer. The answer might be this super safe approach to life. But then again, it might not be. I'm not for sure. You know what I mean?
How many kids got destroyed in Hollywood?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great answer. That's a great point. That's a great point to bring up. Yeah, it's like a lot of them do really horrible. But then a lot of them change and turn around once they figure out like, okay, why am I suffering so much, right?
Some of them were abused, I believe.
Oh yeah,
I believe there was
absolutely.
tons of
Absolutely.
abuse there.
Absolutely. But for one example, think of like Shia LaBeouf, right? Now,
Mhm.
he went and he did he did like a Christian movie where he's like a monk or something like that. He's playing a monk or something like that.
Okay.
And you look at the interviews with him now, and he said he's saying, now I don't know how true this is, but he seems to be saying that he's transforming his life by becoming a Christian. You know what I mean? You'd have to look at some of the
Okay.
interviews, and like I said, you might be able to question his sincerity, but I mean that's what he's saying. You know what I mean? And
We all wrestle. I mean, it goes back to, I know you're trying to but it does go back to how we wrestle with things in our mind, right? How do we wrestle with art? How do we wrestle with doing it? How do we wrestle with looking at it? How do we wrestle with going places or not going places, or doing things or not doing things? You know what I mean? Or how do we, society being evil? How do we take all because we live in society, right?
Yeah.
I would never say go out there and just like live like the Nacho Libre or like a monk, you know what I mean? Anyway, how do we
Great movie.
It is so funny.
It's funny. I mean, Jack Black, for being as weird as he is and kind of, often talking weird stuff, that's a great movie.
I would say as a Christian, go see it. No, no, you do what you want. No.
Yeah.
But anyway, But anyway, how do you navigate being on this earth and navigate all of these things around you? It's complex, like you said.
Yeah.
How do you do it? How do you do it? It is, for me, it's probably a little different than you, but everyone's a little different, and different people, the freedom that Christ gives us versus making sure that we don't use that freedom for evil.
Yes.
And
yeah, that's one thing for sure.
How do we do it?
I absolutely will agree with you on that 100% of the time.
Mm.
That's a for sure thing.
Yeah.
I want to know and I want to analyze the deeper stuff. Anyways.
Oh,
but yeah,
that's
sorry.
okay.
Anyways, we're done.
comment, please.
Yeah,
comment. And,
if you guys have an idea of what that is, what method acting is, you know what I mean? Is it something that's evil, or when people play music like in the spirit, or whatever you want to call that, when they envelop the blues? You ever hear about that? That's what blues singers, blues players do. If you guys have any ideas of what that kind of stuff is, give us a comment.
Yeah, or if you think we're off our rocker in terms of how we're trying to look at this stuff, let us know.
I mean, we're trying to attack
us.
it from many different angles. You know what I mean? I'm obviously bringing up a couple different, examples that are weird to try to see if it like hits somewhere or something. You know what I mean? Sometimes is what we have to do. You had mentioned walls, putting up walls. You gotta sometimes you gotta break down those walls, and you gotta figure out how to break down those walls. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To look at a certain thing or something. I don't know, or maybe you don't. Maybe the answer is you don't. So anyways, all right, guys, thanks very much if you're still here. This was lots of fun. I really liked it. I guess we started off a little slow, but it got pretty good for sure. Anyways, all right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting on the next one. How do we navigate that? So
yeah.
Good discussion.
No, that was right though. It was eventually where I was trying to take it. You know what I mean? But it's hard to get there because it's hard for me to get the words out in my mind. This is more than art. It's life.
How do you navigate? How do you navigate life? The way we're looking at it, it's how do you navigate? We end up saying, well, how do you navigate this? Well, how do you navigate life? It's how do you do it?